right, let's talk a little bit about why people don't show up to calls. So if you think about being, just one of your leads, one of your prospects that just came across your brand and they have a pain point that they think that you can solve in a unique way and they trust that you can actually solve it, they went ahead and they booked a call. So just put yourself in their shoes. They went through your website, whatever friction that you had before they could actually book a call. You might have a really long video that they have to watch. You might have a long application that they have to fill out. They might not even know where to find you because you're just not easy to find. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you're the first person that comes up on Google when they look up their pain point, or your click-through rate is extremely high on your ads, or your content just is really engaging, and then most of your leads have already known you for months, if not years, before they actually went ahead and booked a call. So it was fine, depending on how much friction that you have. Right? Those are opposite sides of the spectrum. I just want you to think about where you're at in that spectrum, how cold versus warm your leads are, and how much friction versus not friction that you actually have before they can book a call. And also think about how your call is framed. Is it a free strategy session, which is less friction, or is it a massive application like apply now? And we only take on a certain amount of people and they feel like it's almost intimidating to apply because of like the presence that you have online. So that's the other side of the spectrum, right? Now, once someone goes and they actually book a call, one of the main reasons why people don't show up to the call is because they just naturally forget. So, what a really good pre call reminder system does is just simply tell them the time that they have to show up to the call in the right format in their time zone and shows them a really easy way to get access to the call. Now, best practices is to send the meeting link over email because you want to have computer calls. You don't want to have them on your phone, and then the person is going to show up lower intent. So we want to essentially send that meeting link over email. And then when it comes to like the automated iMessages, if you have enough lead volume, then you definitely are going to be on the iMessaging plan, which is blue bubbles, which are going to get super high response rates. Or, if you're in Europe and if you just don't have a lot of leads, then you'll be using the the SMS automation from the actual CRM that we send out text. It still works. It's just going to get lower response rate unless you're in Europe, and then we'll use WhatsApp. So yeah, I mean, as long as those messages go out at the right times, minutes after they get their first text from the sales rep, and then 7 seconds after they get the next sales rep text asking them an open-ended question, and then 4 hours later, if there is no reply, then there's a little ping, and then they reply, and then the sales rep gets an actual notification and they respond back to that person. That's like what a good flow looks like. And then there's obviously best practices for what to say and how to say it, depending on the person and how much like of a response they give, if it's shallow versus if it's extremely in depth. So we'll cover more in terms of like the actual SOPs in the Notion. But for now, that's like the iMessaging side of things. And when it comes to email, it's just best practices of on booking. So 5 minutes after booking, 24 hours before, 4 hours before, and then 1 hour before. Now, depending on where your prospects live, whether that's messages on their phone or if it's on email, then the frequency can definitely change. But that's like general practices, making sure they know where the location is, making sure when it is, making sure why they should get on. So depending on the appointment name, it actually makes a difference as well. If it's just, your business name strategy call, which is very different than like the solution category, like discovery call. So like you want to definitely frame the call accordingly. And then that's like the gist of like the actual call itself. Now, the other reason why people don't show up is just because they don't think it's valuable. So what happens is someone sees that they have a pain point and they book a call, and then it just goes into this mode of like, I don't really need to solve this is the one that's going to solve my problem. Or, I don't really understand like how this is actually going to work for me. Like I just don't really understand that. I don't believe it. Or of course I don't trust these guys. I understand how this solution works for me, but I don't really trust these guys. Or I don't really like understand this process really well. There's so many different things that happen from like a level of problem aware to solution aware to product aware. If you think about someone and really understand the problem, why it happens, like what are the causes, like what it impacts, and then the solution, like why that solution, why it's the right time, why it fits in with their specific workflow, and then of course like the results it can help them achieve, and then the product, which is like this specific product is the right thing for me at this right time, and I actually believe it's going to work. Like that's a high level overview of the levels of awareness. And when it comes to people not showing up, it's just simply because they just don't, one of those things that's never gets overcome, or they have a question about one of these things that never gets answered. Because questions, objections, and misconceptions are very different things. A question is just as simple like, oh, like what about this? A misconception is, wait, but isn't this like that? And then an objection is like, no, but what if this doesn't happen, right? It's like more like optimistic is more like a question, and then misconceptions are in the middle. You can easily get over those. It's like it's just like a smoke screen. Oh no, it's just like this. They're like, oh, okay, gotcha, makes sense, right? So those can really get in the way if not answered though, because then people are going to assume something, and then that's that. So the value of the call itself needs to be proven in the prospect's head so that they actually see why this call needs to happen. So really what we're going to focus on in building out the pre-call system is educating leads, whether that's through email flows, whether that's through content that they land on when they book a call on a thank you page, or and that's a sales asset that gets sent to them over text, accessed over the thank you page, accessed through the pre-call reminder emails, or access through the pre-call value educational emails, all different mechanisms of how we're going to deliver this content. We want to be able to answer those questions, objections, and misconceptions in their head, in the right order. So what also is a big mistake that people make in their pre-call system, the same type of just value, and trust building, and authority building to all different types of prospects. But remember, some people are just at the beginning of the buyer's journey and they need to understand their problem much better before they even understand why the solution makes some sense for them now. So they need more education on like the overall top of funnel, like, why this problem exists, like why this specific problem can't be solved with this, which is their false solution, right? So there's different things that people need to hear. So we essentially are going to want to understand where they're at in that journey. Now, depending on if it's an outbound booking, it's harder to get that data, but if it's inbound, assuming that if they're trying things and failing, that they're going to have more misconceptions and objections about the actual like solution. And then of course, if they're like working with an in-house team or they're paying someone already, that they understand what makes us different and our process different because they're already at the end of the buyer's journey. They just want to know something that's unique. So that's essentially what a good education system looks like. To dive a little bit deeper into each of those four mechanisms, you have your thank you page, which is like a funnel that someone lands on after they book a call, which is going to have like a simple headline, like exciting them for the call, like reminding them why they booked a call. Then it's going to show like an image of how to confirm the call so that the people like almost works hand in hand with people not forgetting about the call. If it's on their calendar and if they press the little yes check mark box, then they're going to show up more often because they like actually see the call on their calendar and it's not marked as like spam, for example. Then under that, it's going to be a video from the founder or the face of the brand, just exciting them for the call, like reminding them why they booked the call, and then going into like a mini video sales letter. A video sales letter really covers like a couple topics, which is the problem, the solution, the products, which answers all those questions. Could be anywhere from like 3 to like 15 minutes, depending on how warm the leads are, because if someone's much colder, they're probably not going to stick around for 15 minutes. But if someone's already consumed most of your stuff because your lead source is YouTube, for example, or there's events that you've recruited them from, then they're probably going to stick around and listen to you more. So it depends on your lead source, and we'll change the length and the actual topics that we cover also based on levels of awareness. So if most is like in the market for revamping their entire business with your unique strategy, which needs a lot more education. So that's going to be like the video. It's like the welcome aspect of it that goes into the actual video sales letter aspect of it. And then under that, we're going to have mini breakout videos, which are like anywhere from like 30 to 120-second videos that answer common questions and objections and handle misconceptions in the right order. So if people just need to literally hear like the end of the buyer's journey questions and objections, and then we're going to have those videos at the end there. If people are at the beginning, then we're going to give them more of like an educational experience with those videos. And then under those, there's going to be a button to go to the sales asset, which is just to increase consumption. The sales asset, really depending on what their application answers are, we can have anywhere from like 2 to 3 different buckets of leads that are going to get different sales assets based on their levels of awareness. And if we really need to, based on their industry, for example, if we're in the B2B market, then we can actually really personalize these assets, personalizing the way that we speak about problems, using the industry lingo, or the case studies that we share, using the right actual like relevance of the case studies. Because if a case study is sent to someone else, and it was a massive result that has nothing to do with what they think that they can achieve, then it's actually not a great case study. Versus if it's like a small result and the person is like, oh, well, I want these huge results, then it's not going to hit home. So we need to make sure the case studies are extremely relevant there. And then when it comes to like overall, framing That's what a good sales asset does as well, which is framing the next action. And in this case, it's going to be to show up to the call so that we can achieve this. Now, one thing that a lot of people do incorrectly is keep things incongruent. So they're going to be perceived as someone on the front end when they posted that content, they made that outreach message, or they posted that ad, and then when someone enters the funnel and they book a call, then it's a completely different game. So for example, if it's a heavy apply now vibe, and then when they book a call, you're doing a ton of education, trying to get them warmed up. Some people are like a little bit confused because they feel like you're almost trying too hard. And they were supposed to be the ones trying hard. And they're going to be the ones that are actually going to show up, depending on how much education you give. Versus if it's a free consultation and you do nothing on the back end and you wait till the sales call, then they're going to show up to the call much colder, and you're going to basically actually have to do a free consultation. But what if you actually started the consultation between the time that someone booked a call and showed up? Then they're getting the value of what they actually just opted into. Another misconception or another mistake that people do is changing like who they are after someone books a call. Like, yes, you got them in the funnel with this bold claim, and then when they enter the funnel, you're gonna just like you want to over under promise always. So if someone like comes in because they think that you could generically like help them grow their business, and you're getting a ton of booked calls, and then in the actual middle of the funnel after they enter the funnel, you're doing a lot more education on the specific metrics you can increase and why people fail to increase these metrics and why it's so important to increase this specific metric and how you increase it with this unique mechanism that most people don't know how to do, or you just increase it this massive amount and most people only know to increase it this small amount. Now that's more educational content that builds upon this promise that you made in the beginning. But on the other hand, what if you like market that you can increase this massive metric, and then when you enter the funnel, you're only talking about growing your business a little bit? Like now it just doesn't match up. So it's super important to stay congruent there. Another thing is like imagine you're marketing to beginners who are doing this one thing that like only beginners understand, and then in reality, like in the middle of the funnel, you're talking about like these expert tactics that only people that are really deep into the industry, deep into the solution are trying. So that's why it's super important to keep it congruent. So that being said, it is a quite dynamic thing. It's not like a one size fits all approach. So when looking at your ICP and when looking at your specific lead volume, which is a big factor to think about. Like if you have a ton of leads, then we probably want to increase more friction so that we have higher quality leads. These are where the metrics are going to really come into play. Just to give a quick high level overview on the metrics around show rate, you have like lead to booking rate. So imagine like you have 100 leads and only 5 of them book a call. That show rate is just such a small sample size. It's not that much of an impact to increase that to like 70% from 50%. It's probably a bigger metric to increase your lead to book rate from 5% to 15% and keep the same show rates, and you're going to just make way more money. Now, of course, you want to increase your show rates, but if you have like so many leads coming through and then you have like a 50% show rate, for example, then getting that to 70% is such a big lever. Now, the other metric to think about is qualified show rate, because you can have 100 calls booked and then 80 of them show up, but only 5% of them close because 20% of them are qualified. Now imagine that was you have a lower show rate, but you have, double the qualification rate. That's naturally going to lead to a higher close rate. And you have to factor that in with the amount of calls you're going to get, because you're going to get less calls that are qualified, but your close rate is going to justify for that. So now you're talking about like different levers you can pull. And then also you have like sales team morale. So if you like go the route of just like, let's reduce the amount of friction that we have for people to book calls, and we let everyone book calls and they're all unqualified, and we close at 5% on a massive amount of stuff, that's fine. But like your sales team is also going to get super burned out because they're taking 8 calls a day and they're just really unqualified, low quality leads. Versus if your sales team, and also like sales team availability, if you can't afford, a sales rep that's taking calls all day, then you're going to want to reduce the amount of calls that you take that are higher quality, that show up more often for the sales reps. So there are just different questions that you want to ask depending on your situation. There's multiple different buckets. I'm sure that you can figure out what you fit in. It's either like you don't have a lot of leads, you just got to get more booked calls and then stop optimizing the pre-call journey, or you have an abundance of booked calls but they're just extremely unqualified. So you're going to want to increase the quality of the calls by increasing friction in the application and increasing the friction of the type of calls. So like making it more of like a apply for your call or apply for a strategy call or book a strategy call instead of like book your free consultation, which everyone's gonna apply for. Not apply, but like book, because you just have like no questions and it's just like free value and people just want to like get free value, right? So then you want to increase friction in the questions that you ask and then potentially rule out people before they can actually book a call so that you can send them off the calendar and then essentially disqualify them. And then, of course, we're going to have things like making sure that we have, okay, let's just say you've added friction and you're still getting to get on the call. They don't see the value, they don't have that as a priority, or they have it as a priority, they just don't know how to cancel because they need to change the time, for example. These are all things to think about, which we just covered in this video, which are also the reason why people don't show up. Now, let's just say you have a high lead quality, then it's coming to close rates and sales cycle length. So you might have a super long sales cycle length, or you just only close like 10% of the people. That's because people have questions and objections and misconceptions in their heads that just aren't being answered until the call or after the call. So what the pre-call system is also going to do is answer those before the call, and then you're going to essentially have way less to handle on the call itself. So then you have to think about, okay, well, if we add a lot of education and pre-call education, that's actually technically adding more friction because people have to go through more touch points before they could show up to the call. And then you want to see the show rate if that's affected. Because if the show rate goes down and you increase the lead like education level and warmth by the time they get on the call, but the close rate goes up and the sales cycle shortens, then that math has to make sense. And it probably will. If the show rate stays the same, if not like increases a slight amount, you know that people are like receiving that message way better. So that's like the overview of, you know, sales cycle length and close rate as well. With that being said, if you have any questions about show rates and any of those metrics that I just mentioned, then reach out. It is really like a levers game and just like a math equation. So it's super easy to map out your data. You probably already have your data. And then like the next level of this is seeing this based on different application questions, because you have like different types of people that are going to have different show rates, right? Like different answers of your application or different sources of your leads, which might have different show rates that you also want to keep into consideration. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.